Right, you are live with BBC News. As we've been reporting, 2 further hostages have reportedly been released this evening. That's according to Hamas. Those individuals, we have not at the moment received any independent verification on that, but those details have been coming through in the last hour, 90 minutes or so. And we're going to talk now with someone who has extensive experience in trying to negotiate for the release of hostages from Gaza. Oliver McTurnan. He is co-founder of the conflict mediation group Forward Thinking. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you for the invitation.
So since we invited you, this developing news in the last 90 minutes, as I mentioned, 2 more hostages released according to Hamas. We await independent verification of that. But whilst we do, what's your reaction to it?
Well, I think it's a good sign, and it's exactly a week ago. Today I was in Doha, and I conveyed through channels the desire to release all of the civilian hostages and without any preconditions. So hopefully this could be the beginning, but it takes two to tango, as they say, if I can put it that way. That without the willingness on both sides to secure the safe passage of all the civilian hostages, I think people will be in danger.
OK, can you take us, as it were, into the room where it's happening, behind the curtain? What we received from the social media account, the Hamas statement, they talked about Qatar, Egypt, mediation. What does that mean? What's going on?
Well, it means messages are passed. There's never direct engagement between Israeli officials and Hamas officials. They don't meet together. They have always used intermediaries to pass messages. And it's a long-term, usually long-term, because usually there's a quid pro quo. What do we get for this? Who do we get? And so forth. In this particular case, I understand, I think it was the operatives who went into Israel committed the atrocities, and I think it's inexcusable the taking indiscriminately of civilians, that they made a mistake. And the way I would see it is that Hamas are keen to hand back all the civilian hostages. Now, I'd stress civilian as opposed to the military.
OK, that's an important distinction. You mentioned quid pro quo. Would it be your understanding that the 4 people released, if we do get confirmation of the latest 2, that there will be something in place then? And what could that be?
Well, Lewis, from the conversations I had in Doha, I think the fact they're civilians, there were to be no conditions. Right. They were going to be handed back as soon as conditions allowed for their safety, because you wouldn't keep 200, or it won't be 200, it'll be, I don't know how many civilians, but you would not keep them all in the same place. So it's a question of how do you move such numbers around Gaza? Do you release them 2 by 2 or whatever? I would hope not. I would hope that we could have a ceasefire, that we could create conditions in which a process of exchange could take place. And I say that should take place in these circumstances without any conditions.
Interesting. You've made the distinction civilian and not. What, therefore, is the process and protocol around non-civilian hostages?
Well, the practice of taking soldiers, and I'm explaining it, not endorsing it, not justifying it, but the practice of capturing Israeli soldiers was simply to use those young people as leverage to release Palestinian prisoners from Israeli jails. Currently, before this outbreak of cycle of violence, you might say, renewal of that cycle, there were about 4,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails. Now, some of those were convicted, some were on the detention without trial. And the capture of a soldier was a precious commodity, if I can put it that way, a bargaining chip in which you would get these cases reviewed. I think the answer to it for me would have been for Israel to, after the Shalit deal, to have introduced a review system of all cases and have had an independent review of all the convicted Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails so that there could be some hope of people being released. At present, there's no hope for many of them.
Oliver McTurnan, absolutely fascinating to get your behind-the-scenes expertise. Thank you very much for coming on the programme.
Thank you, Lewis. And let's hope the news tonight is the beginning of something that will be ongoing and all of those hostages will be returned to their families.
Oliver McTurnan, thank you. I just want to bring you an update to this. In the last few minutes, CBS News, which is the BBC's media partner in the US, they're now reporting the 2 hostages are being released by Hamas. An Israeli government official has confirmed to CBS News the names of the 2 as well. So just to outline exactly how the process of verification and confirmation in these kind of situations works, we had initially the statement on social media by Hamas through Hamas media channels, which we then take and clearly investigate. We don't take that on its own. The way that media organisations work around the world, the BBC included, is you have partnerships with other media organisations. Ours in the US is CBS News. They have spoken to an Israeli government official confirming to CBS News the names of the hostages. And in terms of how this plays out, last week when we had the first 2 hostages being released, after the CBS News confirmation, the BBC did independently confirm a pretty short time after that too. Right, let's take a look at another post that's just come up on social media. You can see from the ICRC. Let's see what they're saying about it. We facilitated the release of 2 more hostages, transporting them out of Gaza this evening. Our role as a neutral intermediary makes this work possible, and we are ready to facilitate any further release. We hope that they will soon be back with their loved ones. And to reiterate, what happened the last week with 2 hostages was a similar process, and it wasn't until that they were confirmed safe on Israeli territory that we then heard from officials and authorities in Israel confirming things like name and status of the 2 hostages. So we will wait and see if and when that happens, but clearly more confirmation coming through that 2 Israeli hostages have been released by Hamas. We're going to keep across all those details for you, and when, of course, the BBC establish our own independent verification, we'll bring that to you as well.